Welcome to the Real People, Real Stories podcast, brought to you by the Paciello Group, bringing you the interesting and diverse stories of individuals working to make the world a more inclusive place.
Hey, welcome to Real People, Real Stories podcast, brought to you by the Paciello Group and its affiliate Interactive Accessibility. I am your host, Mark Miller, thanking you for helping us keep it accessible. Do us a favor. If you're enjoying the podcast, share it. Tell someone about it. Hey, even link to it from your accessible website. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Marissa, producer Marissa, for being on the podcast with us today and for all the hard work that you do pulling this together every single time. And Steve, welcome and thank you for joining.
Well, Mark, Marissa, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So, Steve, we want to talk to you about a few different things here. First of all, we work in accessibility. The podcast is about accessibility, and you rely on accessibility all the time. So, can you tell us a little bit about why you rely on accessibility?
Well, I am totally blind. I've been blind since birth, and so accessibility has always been a part of who I am. It's more than a career; it's a way of life in a way, and technology has evolved at such an incredible rate, and amazing things have become possible because they've been made accessible. So that just kind of jazzes me up even more about accessibility.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's something that we often end up talking about, is just how much technology has evolved, right? And how exciting that is. I think especially for folks like yourself who are blind, it really has opened up a lot of possibilities, just being able to work, using computers on the internet. But then equally sort of frustrating when those things aren't quite built accessibly and it becomes difficult. I think that before the mic's heated up here, we were even talking about an experience that you've had where you're trying to do something on the web and it's provided a challenge. But how do you find that? I mean, are you in your work day, are you really able to kind of navigate things pretty well now? Or are there a lot of things that are still kind of jumping out at you and causing problems?
Well, it's an interesting question because on the one hand, as I've remarked to many fellow friends who are blind, it's a great time to be blind. I mean, we have more access to information than we've
Everybody
ever
should
had.
do it.
Yeah, everyone should do it, right? Jump on in. But seriously, right? Like I remember growing up, the thing I used to hate when I was at school was going to the library. I don't know if kids even do that anymore, but back in my day, kids would go to the library every week, and it was the most boring thing ever because everyone would be able to get a book, and I'd have to get like the one Braille book that they had, and it was usually a really bad book that I never would have ordered myself, but it was like the only thing I could have. And magazines would come out and the kids would get all these different magazines, and I'd get my copy in Braille 6 weeks later. And like no one would care because like everything I had was old news, right?
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to now and we have everything digital on my phone. I can get everything the second it's published. If there's a new book that's released, I can download the accessible version from Amazon or Apple or a number of different sources. In fact, I have multiple sources. I'm not restricted to just one, and that's real awesome stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have situations where my daughter was going on a field trip and they needed to have a consent form filled out, for parents, and I couldn't do it. The form is totally inaccessible. So I'm like the one parent who.
Was that a physical form, Steve?
No, it was a
online.
Well, it was a PDF quote fillable form where all I heard was edit, 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 edit. And then of course you have to print it and sign it. And I wasn't sure how to deal with that. And of course the school was like, well, do you have anyone that could help you with it? And I thought, yeah, okay. So
yeah,
it's great that we have so much access, but in work and in life, I still encounter things that pose significant accessibility challenges. And I think the thing that people don't realize is that it's very demoralizing to not be able to do something that's simple or something that everyone else can do, and you can't do it because of an accessibility challenge. It's hard to separate that and not feel dumb or inadequate or inadequate as a person, as a parent, as a and I think that takes a huge toll, at least on me. And so, I think accessibility is in part being able to do stuff, but also how not being able to do that thing makes you feel, the psychological, emotional impact that has, is huge.
It's a great point. And I think it's something that, I hope more and more people start to kind of pay attention to. I can remember once I was coming back from an accessibility conference, and as I was standing in line to get my ticket at the airport, there was a blind gentleman in front of me, and, I identified he was blind because he had a white cane. So I said, "Hey, how's it going? Did you just come from this conference?" Because a lot of people with varying disabilities are often at the same conferences that we are. And he's like, "Oh yeah." So we were chatting and everything. And then as we got up to the line, he went to there. He couldn't get access to the teller because she was kind of tied up. And but there was a kiosk. And I'm like, and so I'm helping him out. I'm like, "Oh, there's a teller, but she's really busy. It doesn't look like she's going to free up very soon, but there's a kiosk here." And I said, "Don't think it's accessible, but if it's okay with you, I'm happy to help you through it." And he kind of reluctantly was like, "Okay." And then as we were kind of working that out, the teller freed up. And so I said to her, "Oh, the teller freed up." And then I looked at her and said, "Would you mind helping him get his ticket?" You know what she said? "Why can't he just use the kiosk?"
Here's the kiosk. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, it was so painful." And I said, "Well," and then he jumped in, or I jumped in, or somebody was like, "He's blind. Can he do it?" But he wanted to work with a teller, and not this guy that he was kind of developing a relationship or a friendship. You don't want your friends to sit there and, plug in your credit card number and, all that kind of stuff. So it's, I think, you use the term demoralizing, but that's when other people have to do stuff for you.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the experience, right? And that's the advantage of accessibility, is that presumably you can do it yourself.
Exactly. And especially if it's a private thing, right? Like if you go to the doctor, I've gone to the doctor and they've asked my 8-year-old to help me with paperwork. And I'm like, he can't spell these words,
Right.
how is he supposed to bless? Maybe I don't want him to, or my wife will go with me and they just assume she's a caregiver. Or in one infamous case, my wife was with me at the doctor and the doctor turned to her and said, "Are you mom?"
Oh, oh.
I thought it was.
That's never mind accessibility or any of that, right? That hits on a few levels.
That's horrifying.
So did you guys attend his subsequent funeral, or?
Yeah.
No, I mean, she was livid. She was just outraged, and I should have stood up for her, but I'm like, she thinks you're my mom. That was great. But I just, it makes it tough because they just assume, right?
Yeah.
And so and my question is, well, geez, why can't we pre-fill out these forms? It's the same form, they're just copying it.
Yeah.
Can I print it out or just submit it online? Like in this digital age, why should how to complete a paper form be a thing? I mean, that's just silly to me, know. And if it is a thing, fine, but then there's an awareness piece of maybe we should ask the person how they need help, if they need help, or what kind of help they need.
How would you like
accommodate?
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other interesting thing, Steve, that you brought up, and this is something that we've seen since the pandemic, right, is a lot of schools now are more focused on accessibility because their student body has been forced home and to participate over the internet, right? But the one thing that's come out of that is kind of ancillary that nobody thought of, that you don't think of out of the gate, is parents with disabilities and their ability to support their kids. So maybe they have kids without disabilities, and their kids are fine, on their Zoom classes and in submitting their homework and all this kind of stuff. But then when it comes time to help them, or like in your case, to fill out that form, they're not accessible for that parent who has a disability or who's blind. And so it's really interesting. And this is turning into a question for you, I promise. But it's something that sort of this pandemic has flushed out, if you will, right? Are there certain things that you're finding, like certain new challenges that are being presented to you because of the pandemic and because of the kind of the new normal that we all live in?
I think transportation's the big one. Uber and Lyft, of course, are still operational, which is great, but especially in the beginning of the pandemic, doing things like getting groceries was a challenge because you have services like Instacart and Amazon's Prime Now and similar services, but it was hard because everyone was using them, right? Demand was far outpacing the availability of people, so ordering groceries was a real challenge. And I had some friends of mine who were blind that were struggling to find like household cleaners and
Mm-hmm.
other products that because traditionally what would happen is if you couldn't use those services, you could go to the store, go to customer service, and they might find someone to help you shop in store. But now no one wants to be within 6 feet. You can't hold on to someone's arm. Touching a cart is like a yucky thought. And so how do you do that? How do you do that in-store experience? What does that look like? And so getting help in store is a real challenge, which might be somewhat mitigated if the delivery services were working more effectively or efficiently. And like I say, they've kind of gotten better, but initially it was a real mess. And so that posed a real challenge. I think for me, good and bad has come out of it. I mean, again, it's hard to independently do things because of all the social distancing stuff. I hate going to a store and if I have to stand in line, I don't know where the dot is that I'm supposed to stand on. And of course, I always feel stupid saying, hey, can you tell me if I'm supposed to move further away from you, to the person ahead? Because that's weird. And they probably have their own anxieties. They don't want me close to them, which I get. So there's a whole level of sort of challenge and frustration that surrounds physical in-store type experiences, or going out in public, going to a restaurant, and anything like that. On the other hand, there's some pros in that a lot of stores have pickup, curbside pickup and that sort of stuff that didn't used to have it. So now it's possible in a lot of cases to order stuff and just to go pick it up curbside or get it curbside. And I thought, wow, that would have been cool if we could do it before like that,
Right.
And so some good things have come out, but definitely some challenges have come about as well.
We had a blind gentleman here in town who would he'd walk around town quite a bit, and right when the pandemic started, he was declaring that his white cane was a social distancing stick, so he
That
could
works.
make sure
Good idea.
that he stayed far. So maybe that's a tip for you, Steve. You just poke him with that stick.
Just poke him with that. I also there was a YouTube, I think, or something where someone had taken those pool noodles, those floatable,
Yes, yes.
and made like a hat. I thought, I need this in my life. That would be so awesome.
So you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because I think that
The pool hat.
the pool hat, yeah, no, the pool hat, but also YouTube, right? And this is why, like, Marissa and I are very comfortable and used to being around people who are blind because we work with people who are blind every single day, right? But people who might be listening to this podcast and don't have that kind of exposure, I can imagine right now they're thinking, wait, how do you know, right? You saw a YouTube video and the guy had a pool to, a tube on his end, and you're blind. Do you even watch YouTube, right? And again, Marissa and I kind of know these answers, but can you just can you take a moment and just describe like how you participate in something like YouTube, and then and how the accessibility of that works for you, and what helps you sort of enjoy something like a video online more if certain things are available to you? I don't know.
Gosh, it's
That was
hard to
terribly constructed question. I'm sorry, but
no, I totally get it. And it's hard to imagine that there was a time before YouTube. What did we do all day at work?
how do we learn how did we learn right? And how do we learn how to do stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's time to rake my leaves again. Let me just see if I can find
pull
a
up a
YouTube
YouTube
video.
on that. Exactly. YouTube's for everything. I think that's a great question that you asked, because blind people do watch TV. they look at videos. You know, it's a visual world, right? And we've got to use visual language. We don't have to like change the language that we use, because otherwise it's a really weird, awkward conversation. Like, hey, did you see the game last? I mean, did you hear? Did you?
Right.
You know, no,
I've
you
corrected
watch the
many
game.
a friend. I'm like, just say the words.
Just say
Stop
it, because
stumbling.
you're gonna look way more awkward if you try to go around it. YouTube's great. You know, it's awesome. I think the big accessibility challenge is that when people are descriptive and talk about what they're doing, it's a really great experience for me. But when people don't talk about what they're doing, then of course it's a real challenge. So like, imagine, for example, you have a video and someone's showing someone how to do something online, and they say things like, okay, so now we're going to click over here, and you can see this opened up, and I'm going to go down. All right, I got that. And then as you can see, this is highlighted. You know, you have no idea what the person's talking about. And if they did that same video, they could say something like, you know, without adding a lot of extra time or anything, they could say, you know, okay, I'm going to click on the file tab. And now coming down over here, we've got this print icon. I'm going to click on that. And it's showing my list of printers now. And the top one, it says default. I'm going to click the print button over here, and my document's going to print. You know, and so you're adding just a few extra words to be descriptive. And even though I can't see exactly what the person's doing in the video, I have enough context now to probably be able to follow along. So YouTube's awesome. I love that. You know, I think what I love about it is everyone can do it. You know, it's you don't have to have fancy equipment. Anyone can do it. And
we're doing it right now.
Exactly. Right. Like even we can do it. It's fantastic. Yeah.
You know, Steve, your story reminds me of something that Mark actually brought to our attention. The CDC, I think, had a page on their site that was describing how to make a mask.
Yep.
And there were images. It was a 3-step process to make your own mask. And this alt text were step 1, step 2, and step 3. Like,
that's what the alt text
was. Really helpful.
Yeah. These complicated visual, like folding instructions, and then alt image. Yeah, step 1. Alt, step 2.
So if you're blind, like, you're just gonna have to get COVID. Like,
I did not.
That did not
help. And that was a case where the actual instructions were part of the image. So it was sort of like I don't know, you know, an image of a page that had the visual instructions and then the written instructions, but the written instructions were an image. So it was all sorts of wrong. But the funny thing is there were 2 separate descriptions on that page. One of them was fully accessible and perfect, and the other one was this odd little not accessible thing.
We had a while ago, I worked for a big retailer. I don't know if I can name them or not, but either way, I worked for a large retailer, and they had this video that showed tying ties. And the whole premise of this video was like, it was a 30-second video, and in that time they showed like a bazillion ways that you can tie your tie. The idea being, you would see this, you'd be
a
like,
lot of ways.
That's the knot that I want. But how do you describe that, right? The whole point was it's supposed to be fast paced, and you know, they're doing it really fast.
Are you looking to describe the knot, or are you looking to describe the process of tying?
The process, like, exactly, like, it's really complicated, right? And I think what we did then, and this was years ago, was we put a link to a more verbose description of the process, and here's how you have to, because a lot of it is, you know, how you have to hold the tie and which hand you cross over which one so you don't tie your thumbs together. You know, it's a pain. And so we had a text-based document that provided a lot of description, but linked to it from the video, so that if someone needed that description, they could have it, and if they didn't, then they didn't. But it solved the problem of, oh my gosh, we can't add description to this video because then it's going to be like a half hour long, which probably would have been. That's okay as long as the information is available. I don't mind clicking an extra link. I'm cool with that. I just need to know where it is and not have to search all over the world to find it.
You just roll your mouse over here.
I now think that audio describing tying a tie should be the final exam in audio description school.
Oh, it would be great. Yes.
In under 30 seconds, you have to describe 5 different ways.
And that is, just for our listeners, really, there is a technical term for what we're kind of dancing around here. Well, I guess there's two things. There's just describing something, and then there's actually something called audio description that you wouldn't see it on a YouTube video necessarily, unless an organization that was really conscientious had created it. But a lot of your Netflix shows, for example, in fact, the first one was Daredevil, which is the blind superhero show. That was the first show that Netflix ever offered with audio description. And that's where in the sort of gaps in the dialogue and sound effects and stuff like that, they're actually describing things that are occurring that are not, obviously able to be discerned from the rest of the audio track. So there is a way to that people handle this and to make things more accessible. And the other interesting point, Steve, that I think that I want to tease out of this is that when you talk about, with your example, when you're like, click over here, click over there, here's the drop-down menu, that is great for you as a person who's blind because it gives you that context, right? But unintentionally, so I have, I talk about on the podcast oftentimes, I have both dyslexia and ADD, kind of mildly. And even though it's a completely different sort of thing, when somebody is that descriptive as they're doing something visual, that second method of input helps me. It keeps me kind of locked in and focused. And I don't have to watch it a second time oftentimes or whatever. So sometimes these things where we're learning how to accommodate for somebody who's blind, for example, are really helping other people. It goes back to the old Siri was an assistive technology before it was something we all used.
It's funny. That's something that also has sort of emerged from this pandemic. I think about, I'm in a lot of online meetings, as I'm sure as basically everyone at this point. And the first question that gets asked in every single meeting is, can everybody see my screen? Right. It's the first thing everyone says that, right? And I think, okay, first off, I can't. Blind people can't see your screen. But what about people that are like watching the meeting on their phone or are driving or looking after their toddler or, let's be honest. We've all been in meetings where you hear someone warming up a snack in the background. They're not looking at their screen. It's not about disability, but about, is someone contextually in a place where they can see the screen, blind or not, right? And what I'm finding is, adding that extra description as you're talking through the PowerPoint or whatever it is you're doing, not only is going to help me, but it's going to help people who are looking on it on a really tiny little screen on their phone or aren't even looking at it at all. They're not going to see your colorful PowerPoint. And so if you use descriptive words instead of saying this here, like this,
and you sound smarter.
And you sound smarter. You just sound better. So it benefits everyone. It doesn't even benefit just people with disabilities or a particular disability, but everyone, because it's such a challenge now, given everything going on in these crazy times, to focus in on any screen share, right? So it's really beneficial to everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that we as people who work in the industry get pretty good at that, but it's a fantastic best practice. And that point about kind of a lot of these accessibility things, we all have what we could kind of classify as like maybe temporary disabilities, right? Maybe you're with your phone out in the bright sunlight and you can't really, there's too much glare on the screen. But if the website's using proper color contrast ratios, you've got a better chance of seeing that under those kind of specific conditions than you would otherwise. We all, sprain a wrist and can't use a mouse, so keyboard accessibility helps. And it's amazing, like just how informative it can be to solve the needs for accommodations for various people, how informative that can be on how we can do things better for everyone, and the overall importance. So that's a great context and great story.
Yeah, and it's a great time to do it because we're innovating, right? The best part of accessibility, the thing that keeps me sort of going to work in the morning is that accessibility is really a springboard for innovation. I love that. I mean, you mentioned Siri, but whether Siri or other digital assistants or just so many things, right? Accessibility really leads or fosters innovation. That's awesome. And I think we're all working in a different way. We're all interacting in a different way. So much of our lives have been turned upside down. And while that has its own stresses and such, it's also created sort of a hotbed for innovation. We're rethinking how we do things, right? And we're rethinking them in a way that is going to benefit all of us.
Mhm.
And that's real exciting to me because I think we have a unique opportunity. I know it's weird to think of the pandemic and opportunity in the same sentence, but you know, as we sort of reinvent how we do what we do and how we live, you know, we can sort of step back and take a look at it and be like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we do this so we can all benefit? Whether I'm blind, whether I have a bad bandwidth internet connection, whether I'm on a mobile device, whether I'm driving, you know, I want to include everyone. It doesn't matter. I just want to include everyone because we're all struggling to partake in this activity or attend this event or do this thing. And I'm excited about that. I think we have a possibility to reimagine a lot of stuff, and we'll sort of include accessibility by default because it just makes sense to do.
Really well said, Steve. And I think that to your point, I would say, you know, how else do we look at a pandemic other than as an opportunity? You know, it's super easy to look at all the things that we can't do. We can't go out to eat anymore. We can't, you know, gather socially in large groups with our families. I mean, you know, I know we've modified our holiday plans based on the pandemic. Those are easy things to look at, but I think that you know, when you have a challenge like that, just like when you have a challenge like a disability, looking at it as an opportunity is really the only way you should focus on it, because that is the only way to really move forward and take advantage of it. And I think all the points that you made are fantastic around that, you know. And
Yeah.
you said it much more eloquently than I did, and your voice is really cool. So I think we also should just trade roles, Steve. I don't know why you're not the host and I'm not the guest, but
Well, we
I guess
could
this
just
is what we're
flip
stuck with.
halfway through and like
We
do it
just
the other,
switch.
confuse everyone
Yeah.
who's watching this. Yeah, it would be,
The
that'd be fun.
Oh, Marissa, did you have something you wanted to add? Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to say that your way of trying to put a better spin on a crisis of biblical proportions. One example of that is I have not gone to a Passover Seder in years because my mom's side of the family, who is Jewish, they live about 6 hours away. And no, I'm not driving. But this year we had a Zoom Seder. It was amazing because I got to see everybody and I got to enjoy their company, but I didn't have to drive. And we never ever would have done that had it not been for the fact that nobody was able to get together. So
Exactly. That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of
So
the tiny bright spots.
It's really good. I mean, I've reached out to people I haven't called
Yeah.
in years because I think, oh, they're busy or I'm busy, right?
Mm,
And now I think, well, geez, they're probably at home doing the same thing I'm doing, which
nothing.
is nothing, right?
Yeah.
So of course they're going to be home, and they are, and it's
Yeah.
so great to make those connections.
Yeah.
You know, I hope that really continues. And
yeah, I hope we learn.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're learning and there's a lot of innovation in all those points, but I think in terms of behaviorally, I hope that there's some learning too.
Mhm.
So Steve, are you still in Maine? I saw that you originally started an AT and training company in Maine at the beginning of your career. Is that where you hail from now?
No, I actually, well, not at the moment. So yes, I started an assistive technology company in Maine,
Mm-hmm.
where I met my wife, and so I sort of married into Maine and really loved Maine. Maine was home for a while,
Where in
and
Maine were you?
I was in Augusta, so right in the capital.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then I got a contract opportunity with Target Corporation, and it was supposed to be a 3-week opportunity, and so I came to Minneapolis for 3 weeks. Except that halfway through it, they asked if I could stay another 3 weeks. And then they said, could you stay a few more weeks? And that went for about a year. And after a year, my wife said, you know, you have to come home or we're going to come out there because we have 2 kids. And a position opened up. So I had to call her about 2 weeks before I was supposed to go home and say, well, actually, you guys are going to move here. So
Mm-hmm.
I was popular, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Kids
She
loved
said,
me.
great.
Yes, I was like, what are you doing today? Do you mind like packing?
Am I moving?
Yeah.
You get that box right there.
Exactly. She'll forgive me eventually. At least that's what I've told myself. This was about 9 years ago. So anyway, we live just outside Minneapolis. I'm not with Target anymore, but we sort of relocated here, and we live outside Minneapolis, and we always get to this time of the year and wonder why we're still here, as it's like 15 degrees and snowing and stuff. So,
well, Maine wouldn't be much better.
well, it'd be like 30 degrees and snowing though. I mean, it's,
We've actually, so I'll let the cat out of the bag here. I'm in southern New Hampshire, so I'm not far. I'm a couple hours from Augusta. My family, my father's side of the family's really from the Camden, Lincolnville area.
Fantastic.
So cool. That's east, right on the coast from Augusta.
Yeah.
And we've been in the 70s. So yes, it would be quite a bit warmer here.
Yeah, there's that.
But I'm always thinking I need to move south because it's still cold.
Well, south, yeah. I mean, rarely do you hear. I think I'm the only person who found the place colder to move to than the one I left. I mean, if you think about it, I really didn't have any options for a colder environment. Even Alaska is warmer than we have. I remember we had one time, I was so proud of this. We had one day where the high was like negative 15 or something. And I tweeted out that the weather in Minnesota was actually warmer than the weather on Mars. That the low in Minnesota was warmer than the high on Mars or something like that. And NASA retweeted it. It was my 30 seconds of fame.
That's amazing.
I could
You're that guy. I knew I knew you from somewhere.
Yes, I got a retweet from NASA. Totally stupid, pointless tweet, but yes, it was my moment of space fame that I called out Minnesota for being warmer than Mars.
Is that a new Andy Warhol? Everybody has their 15 minutes of fame, and now they have their 15 minutes of, or you have your 15 minutes of space fame.
Yeah, well, it was
way better than
a
regular
retweet,
fame,
right? So it didn't even get it 30 seconds, but still, it was.
Hey, you know what?
So where are you working now, Steve?
So now I work for Optum, which is part of United Health Group.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about your job, what you're doing there for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm part of their accessibility team. We have a pretty large accessibility team, and healthcare is very important for me. We've had a number of healthcare or health emergencies and issues in my family, and accessibility to healthcare is really important to me. So I'm proud that United Health Group and Optum are focused on accessibility and making sure that all of the stuff that our members see, all the member facing information and stuff is accessible, and that's a priority because when you're dealing with healthcare, dealing with accessibility is really the last thing you should have to do or even want to do. You want to be focused on getting the info you need, on getting better, or whatever's going on needs to be the primary focus. I know when I was going through a bunch of medical stuff, or my family was, my focus needed to be on them, not trying to figure out how to make the website work. So I work with a lot of the development teams at United Health Group, and work to ensure that as they're building new and exciting things, that they're doing it with accessibility in mind, that accessibility is part of the process and it's just part of what happens.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think your point about healthcare is just one of those areas where it's incredibly important, and going back to the pandemic thing, obviously that's probably more underscored nowadays than even before. Yeah, how important it is. So good work that you do, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a little crazy with all the COVID stuff, making sure that information's accessible, but just because of how frequently it's how fast and furious it's coming, but it's so important, right? Like now more than ever to have timely information and to make sure that information's accessible. It's just so critical, and I'm just really proud that technology and the internet and everything has sort of evolved to a place where that can be a reality. I think 15, 20 years ago, that might not have been possible. We might have had the special Braille version of information, which you'd get 6 weeks after the print one, right? Like, really, going back to the whole, it's a great time to be blind thing, access to information we've got capability now that we've never had, and that's really, really awesome. We can be a lot better informed.
My favorite thing about your "it's a good time to be blind" analogy is just imagining you with your kids, with your own like blind back in my day. Like back in my day, we didn't get the Braille magazine until 6 weeks later.
Oh gosh.
You kids don't know how spoiled you are.
Oh my God.
You have to walk uphill,
uphill,
ways.
Pictures, pictures are the other one. I have a blind friend of mine, and he has a young child, and he was taking, pictures. We were at some event, and I thought, wow, with image recognition and storage, like being virtually free and limitless, you can take pictures now, family pictures, and actually enjoy them. Back in my day, we've got albums. My wife is an avid scrapbooker and photo album person, and we've got books of albums that I can't enjoy at all. Like I get nothing out of them. And of course, back in my day, it was expensive to take pictures because you had to have them developed, and not like these kids today that can just erase it and retake it. It's so cool.
Steve, they'll never know what we went through. How hard it was.
They'll never get the horror.
Yeah.
Horror. Yeah.
Well, listen, we have to wrap things up, but it was fantastic talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you so
much. Really enjoyed it. And since we declared you're probably a better podcast host than me, and we should have had this reversed.
Yeah.
If I give you our outro, would you like to do our outro for us?
I could try. And
okay.
It's been great being here as well. Thank you guys so much for having me. And give me the outro, and I'll see what I can
So this is what I would say, Steve. You'll have to flip around the names. I would say, this is Mark Miller thanking Steve and Marissa and reminding you to keep it accessible. You have to flip the names.
Oh man, flip the names.
You want to hear it again?
This is Steve Sawczyn thanking. Yeah, I better hear it again.
You would say thanking Mark and Marissa and reminding you to keep it accessible.
This is Steve Sawczyn thanking Mark and Marissa and was it reminding
you to keep it accessible?
Gosh, I'm doing such a great job. My first day as the unofficial. All right,
this was a test
for real this time.
Yeah, you're hired.
This is Steve Sawczyn thanking Mark and Marissa and reminding you to keep it accessible.
Awesome.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Paciello Group, the experts in digital accessibility. Stay tuned for more Real People, Real Stories podcasts coming soon.